Imagine a virtual world so vast and immersive that players from around the globe log in daily, forming friendships, rivalries, and epic memories the same as they would in real life. In 2004, Blizzard Entertainment launched World of Warcraft, a massively multiplayer online role playing game that would go on to revolutionize the genre and redefine what virtual worlds could be. With its expansive world of Azeroth, World of Warcraft created an online experience that attracted millions of players, setting a new standard for online communities and gameplay. Today, we're diving into the creation and impact of World of Warcraft on the gaming culture, a game that's been captivating players for nearly 2 decades. So grab your mount, sharpen your sword, and join us on today's journey through Azeroth as we take another trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to our 221st episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people that have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby, video games, a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're stepping into the world of Azeroth to explore the game that defined an era, World of Warcraft. First launched on November 23rd, 2004, WoW took the MMORPG genre to new heights. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who also spends way too much time grinding for loot in virtual worlds. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, I know you play, so what's your main class in WoW?
It's a monk, Dave.
Why?
Well, it's so versatile. You can heal, you can tank, you can damage. Who doesn't want to be like Poe?
Very true.
What about you?
Paladin.
Why?
I'm tanky. But I like the ability to beat up on things. And I think Paladin is a kind of a nice compromise between being just a sheer tank and still being able to inflict damage.
That is very fair, at least from what I know.
So Paladin. All right, excellent. Well, we're going to be talking about WoW, where Blizzard was as a company when they decided to create WoW, what led up to the decision to create WoW, and kind of talking about the development of it. Of course, we're only going to hit the tip of the iceberg today. It's always a problem when we do MMORPGs because realistically, they never stop development if they've been lasting a long time, right?
True. That is a very fair point.
Yeah, so I mean, realistically, we could probably do an episode in every single year that WoW has been in existence, which is 20 years this week. Crazy enough. Crazy to think that an MMORPG has lasted 20 freaking years. I mean, and you have RuneScape too, but it's amazing for both of them, you know? But we are here and we're really going to focus on Blizzard and leading up to WoW and then the release of WoW, and we'll kind of go from there. So before I get into that whole shebang, why don't you tell our listeners what else happened during the current week in gaming history?
Kicking it off, on November 21st, 1990, Nintendo released the Super Famicom in Japan, marking the debut of its 16-bit console that would later be known as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in other regions. As a successor to the immensely popular Famicom, or the NES in Americas and other regions, the Super Famicom featured advanced graphics and sound capabilities, setting new standards for gaming at the time. Launch titles included Super Mario World, F-Zero, and Pilot Wings, showcasing the system's Mode 7 technology for dynamic scaling and rotation effects. The console was an instant success, selling out its initial stock within hours and solidifying Nintendo's dominance in the gaming industry. The Super Famicom SNES would go on to become one of the most iconic and beloved gaming systems of all time, home to legendary titles like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Final Fantasy VI, and Super Metroid.
And nostalgia wise, still my favorite.
It was a fantastic console, but
We all have we all have a formative console, right? We all have a console that existed. I think my theory is we all have a console that existed at just the right time in our formative years. That late childhood, early teens. I think for you is probably the PlayStation 2 would probably be yours.
I'm gonna have to argue with you, Dave, on that one.
PS1,
I'm still gonna have to argue with you on that one.
you a Nintendo 64 guy or GameCube? GameCube.
See what we're gonna get into next. I think will answer the question because this was one of those games that I
Yeah.
think really solidified it for me.
Okay.
And on November 21st, 1998, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released for the Nintendo 64 in Japan, developed and published by Nintendo. Widely regarded as one of the greatest video games of all time, Ocarina of Time introduced groundbreaking 3D gameplay to the Zelda series, revolutionizing action adventure games with its lock on targeting system, open world exploration, and intricate puzzles. Players take on the role of Link as he journeys through time to thwart the evil Ganondorf and save Hyrule, with the ocarina as a central gameplay element for manipulating time and solving puzzles. Praised for its immersive world, emotional storytelling, and innovative mechanics, Ocarina of Time set a new standard for gaming and remains a seminal title in video game history. And, that was just right around the time when I really started getting into video games. I had a friend who had a Nintendo 64 with Ocarina of Time. And, we'd sit there, we'd try to figure out the puzzles together. And it was like, holy crap, they're like gaming puzzles. These two of my favorite, like, these things are awesome. Like,
I
and
think it fits though, because I said Super Nintendo and I would have been 6 or 7 when it came out, and you said Nintendo 64, and you would have been, I mean, in that same time period was when it was hitting its stride. So,
I was
a
going to
lot.
say, definitely not when it was released because I would have been
No,
3.
you would have been 3. Yeah, I know. I know. But I mean, I guess early childhood, I guess, since I debunked mine with teens, because teens for me would have technically been 10 would have been the PlayStation, and so 6 years, 16 would have been the PS2. Yeah. So I
Yeah, I mean,
get,
don't get me wrong. I did love the PlayStation. It was fun for what I played, but it wasn't until I saw my friend with Ocarina of Time that it was really like, damn, I'm really into this.
yeah, but then I think about it too. I mean, Super Nintendo was probably my favorite console, but in all honesty, all the eras, I had a really great time with the PlayStation. And I had a PlayStation 2, but by then I was really starting to get into PC gaming. And PC gaming took over for me for a long, long time. So,
Still has.
yeah, true statement. True statement. All right, what's next on the list?
Next, on November 17th, 2004, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was released for the PlayStation 2, developed by Kojima Productions and published by Konami. A prequel to the earlier games in the series, Snake Eater takes place during the Cold War and follows Naked Snake, the future
Naked
Big
Snake.
Boss. Yes, Naked Snake,
Ooh,
who becomes Big Boss, as he embarks on a mission to rescue a scientist and confront his mentor, the Boss.
the boss.
The game introduced survival elements such as hunting for food and treating injuries, alongside signature stealth mechanics. Praised for its complex narrative, engaging characters, and innovative gameplay, Metal Gear Solid 3 became one of the most celebrated titles in the series and is often regarded as one of the greatest video games of all time.
Honestly, it's not my favorite in the series.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard good things too, but I'm not the greatest person to speak on it.
Right. We all have our preferences. We all have our
In,
preferences.
Indeed, we do. And speaking of preferences, because this was a preference for us, I don't know, it was a fun console. On November 19th, 2006, Nintendo launched the Wii in North America, revolutionizing gaming with its motion sensing controls and a focus on accessibility for all ages. Featuring the innovative Wii Remote, the console encouraged physical interaction, which was showcased in its flagship title, Wii Sports, a game that became a cultural phenomenon and introduced gaming to new audiences. The Wii emphasized simplicity and fun, bringing families and casual gamers into the fold with its user friendly interface and diverse library, including hit titles like Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and Mario Kart Wii. Despite its modest hardware compared to competitors, the Wii became a massive commercial success, selling over 100 million units worldwide and leaving an indelible mark on gaming history.
That would be the last system I bought on launch day.
I mean, it's not a bad one to have bought. The Wii is a lot of fun. I don't currently have ours because it's on loan to another family member, but I would definitely still pick up Wii Sports. I mean, Wii Bowling was the shiznit,
It
man.
was, for sure. You are absolutely right about that.
And speaking of getting up and moving, on November 17th, 2009, Ubisoft released Just Dance for the Nintendo Wii, marking the beginning of one of the most successful dance game franchises in history. The game offered players the opportunity to follow on screen choreographed dance moves to a wide variety of popular songs, using the Wii Remote to track their movements. Just Dance was praised for its accessibility, making it easy for people of all ages and skill levels to enjoy dancing to their favorite tracks. The game's vibrant, colorful visuals and catchy soundtrack contributed to its wide appeal, leading to massive commercial success. Just Dance quickly became a staple at parties and gatherings, spawning numerous sequels and solidifying its place as a cultural phenomenon in a world of rhythm and dance games.
The rhythm is gonna get you. The rhythm is gonna get you. Just Dance was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, especially when it came out on the Xbox and you could use the Kinect.
Oh yeah, the Connect version was good. Connect
Yeah.
was the Connect. We'll have to do an episode on the Connect. Connect itself is fun and fascinating.
Well, there you go. So listen, keep it up, listeners. You'll soon learn about the Xbox Kinect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the track of cultural phenomenons, on November 18th, 2016, Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon were released for the Nintendo 3DS, followed exactly 6 years later on November 18th, 2022, by Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet for the Nintendo Switch. Sun and Moon introduced players to the Alola region, a tropical paradise inspired by Hawaii, and brought significant changes to the series, including the removal of traditional gyms in favor of island trials and the debut of regional variants. Meanwhile, Scarlet and Violet marked a new era for the franchise with a fully open world experience set in the Paldea region, offering players unprecedented freedom to explore and catch Pokemon. Both pairs of games were praised for their innovations, with Sun and Moon revitalizing core mechanics and Scarlet and Violet pushing the boundaries of Pokemon's gameplay, solidifying the franchise's ability to evolve while remaining
Ooh,
beloved by fans worldwide.
that was good.
Indeed, it was. And I can say I wasn't the biggest fan of Sun and Moon, but Scarlet and Violet did hit well.
They were the spot for you.
I mean, that open world, man. I love my open world games, and when you mix Pokemon with it, it was just it hit. It
It
hit
was
so
the
well.
thing.
I didn't like the island trials and Sun and Moon. I think that the regional variants are kind of cool. You got to see some pretty cool stuff there. Like an Alolan Sandshrew is an ice type instead of a ground type. It's pretty cool. But it's just something about it I didn't like as much. But once Scarlet and Violet came out, those were an addicting title for me.
Good to know. I started playing the Pokemon trading card game, the app version, and I've been having fun with that. I honestly never played Pokemon. The games. I mean, the games, sure, but not the card game ever. So I've had to like acquaint myself with the rules, and now I'm kind of at the point where I learning how to build decks and stuff like that. It's kind of fun. It's I don't. It's different. I don't know what I expected from it, but it's different than what I'm used to. Of course, really the only trading card game I'm used to is Magic the Gathering,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not quite the same, because with Magic you get mana and you tap your land, and this one you get energy, and there's some strategy behind the difference in the ways. You know what I mean? You play it?
I know very well. I've been into a lot of those TCGs, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, and Pokemon, and I get it. I do.
Yeah, it's different, but it's fun. I like scratching you get to open a pack of cards every 12 hours. So every 12 hours, I'm like, ooh, new booster pack, ooh, new booster pack, ooh, new booster pack. And you get all the fun cards. So that's
That's how
always
they
the
get you.
draw. I know I was going to say that's exactly how they get you.
But with that, Dave, I think it's time to move on. So why don't we talk about today's topic?
Why don't we talk about today's topic? Indeed. So Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, the first in the Warcraft series, was the game that made Blizzard as a company financially stable. It was developed by Blizzard Entertainment to take advantage of a lull in real time strategy releases for the PC. They took inspiration from one of their previous releases, The Lost Vikings, combined it with Mass Control that was inspired by the Lemmings. We've done an episode on the Lemmings. They added in some multiplayer elements and they covered it all in an art style inspired by the Warhammer universe. And if you're curious why Warcraft and not Orc Battle or something similar, this question was once asked to the producer of the very first Warcraft title, and this is what he said. He said, the short answer is that Alan Adam, one of the two founders of Blizzard, along with Mike Morhaime, had wanted to do a whole series of games about various eras of warfare, both historical and fictional, that would all have the name Warcraft with a subheading. For example, Warcraft Vietnam. Allen was an extremely bright strategic thinker and was thinking about how to take advantage of the critically important, at that time, circa early 90s, dynamic of retail shelf space. Having many related titles on the shelf near each other creates cross selling opportunities and demonstrates that the brand encompasses many games and is consequently well supported. As an aside, Allen should also get credit for ensuring that we had really, really heavy game boxes. If you compared a Blizzard game with its competitors, other PC boxes were light as a feather and the contents would rattle around loosely. Blizzard boxes were packed with a heavy manual, a Blizzard notepad, discs, registration cards, offers, and cardboard packing to prevent rattling, and consequently felt solid and heavy. We did a ton to optimize for retail. So our game, Warcraft Orcs vs. Humans, was the first of that series. There were no other craft games prior to that. And as much as the name predated the game's initial development, it was chosen for its coolness rather than being based on any game design elements. It wasn't meant to be just a high fantasy series. They were thinking about doing a whole war, Warcraft World War II and Warcraft Navy SEALs, for instance. Like it was just going to be war games, and every war game titled Warcraft was going to be made by Blizzard, which is really clever. But didn't pan
Yeah,
out.
no, but it was definitely a clever thought they had.
Definitely was a clever. Released in November of 1994, so now we're talking 30 years ago. The original title in the Warcraft series was a success, ultimately selling 300,000 copies, and launched a series of games that would obviously become part of one of the most well-known franchises of all time, since we're here 20 years after World of Warcraft talking about it for sure. Definitely. So Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness was released in 1995, and we were eventually graced with Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos in 2002. And of course, we know that during all this time, the team at Blizzard was also working on other titles, some of which that we've done whole episodes on. We have other episodes on the history of Blizzard. They started out as Silicon and Synapse, eventually changed their name. You can learn all about that either in episode 19 on Diablo, one of my favorite episodes, or episode 135 on StarCraft. Episode 19, Diablo, in case you didn't know, I've talked about it various times. We compared the original design document to what the game became, and it was probably the single episode that inspired me more so than anything to move over to a straight historical format. That was one of my favorite early episodes, and now here we are.
Here we are indeed, Dave.
Here we are indeed, doing the history thanks to Diablo. We played it too. We played through. Did we finish the third? I don't think we finished the third, did we? Together.
I can't quite remember. No, I don't
But
know.
we finished the first two for sure.
Yep.
We played the original, and then we played the second on its Reforge version, and then we got into Diablo 3, and I don't ever think we finished Diablo 3, and I haven't even really touched Diablo 4, to be honest with you, so boo on me.
Boo on you indeed.
Sometime near the end of, or maybe just after development, the timeline's kind of muddy. Blizzard split its development teams into essentially two teams. Team 1, as it was called, would go on to work on Warcraft 3, and Team 2 was going to work on something completely new for Blizzard. It was going to be an original IP, a project that was tentatively codenamed Nomad. Now, Nomad was built on the foundation that it was going to be a science fiction squad based shooter that took place in a post apocalyptic setting. Its concept art that we know of envisioned a war between turtles and ostriches, so to speak. That was they were not turtles and ostriches, but they were inspired by turtles and ostriches, right? Um, and it was a squad based game in which players built up obviously squads of soldiers. They upgraded their abilities, they found and purchased new guns, and then they could play multiplayer online against other armies. Its gameplay was supposed to be similar to XCOM, but it also drew inspiration from role playing games like Lands of Lore and Final Fantasy at the time. Beyond this, though, there wasn't really any clear vision for this project. And after months of just piecing various elements together, they just couldn't find the core that they were looking for. And in the meantime, EverQuest was released. We covered EverQuest and its history back in episode 81 if you'd like to learn all about it. Incredibly influential role playing game and MMORPG. It was incredibly popular, and all throughout Blizzard Entertainment, Blizzard employees were playing with it. Actually, to be fair, it was said that they were obsessed with it. I mean, we all kind of were when these games first came out. In the past, when they sat down to decide where their next project would lie, the concept of developing their own MMO was brought up at various points thanks to a large number of Ultima Online fans that worked there. But it was never really taken seriously until EverQuest fever swept across the building. If the employees' love for MMORPGs was the gasoline, then EverQuest was the match that lit the fire. With no clear vision for Nomad, the leaders of Team 2 began to talk about whether or not they should cancel their project and start focusing onto an MMO. After all, they had no vision for Nomad, but they did already have in their pocket a high fantasy intellectual property, namely Warcraft, that would be incredibly well suited to the MMO format. Members from both Team 1 and Team 2 talked about throwing their hats into the MMO ring, but truthfully, Team 1 was bogged down trying to create the early versions, the prototypes of Warcraft 3. So, with a little bit of help, the lead animator on the Nomad project, a man by the name of Kevin Beardsley, he put together a presentation for the company's manager meeting. And the manager meeting is where typically all the high level executives got together and they decided on the next projects. And what Kevin presented them with was basically a Warcraft version of EverQuest. It would have Quake style WASD keyboard controls, it would have instance dungeons, it would have a clear quest indicator to make the MMO experience attractive to casual players. So after discussing it at that meeting, Kevin's pitch was given the green light. And as part of that meeting, they also made one more decision, and that was to cancel Nomad. The team began to work on their next project towards the end of 1999. Well, Nomad had no clear vision as this team began to lay out their ideas for what would become World of Warcraft. What they decided they were setting out to do was very clear. They wanted to make a better MMO than EverQuest. That seems pretty simple, right?
I would believe so.
I mean, I want to make this game, but I want it to be better than this game. I feel like that's kind of the design mentality for a lot of games, to be honest with you, especially when you dip your toe into a competitive field, you know?
Not just games. I would say that that's pretty norm for a lot
Products.
of products.
Yeah, very true. That's products in general. I want to make this, but better than my competitor. So, Team 2 at this time was about 50 people strong, and they sat down to make an MMO. They took inspiration from EverQuest, they took inspiration from Ultima Online, but obviously they were using the lore and the characters that were already established in the Warcraft universe. So they kind of had a leg up based on that. You know, we haven't really looked at Warcraft itself. Warcraft 1 didn't really have a story at all. Warcraft 2 is when Blizzard realized that they kind of needed to start to build a background and build lore. And really between Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2 is when the art style that we're really accustomed to with the Warcraft universe was established too. You know, Warcraft 1 was their first foray into RTS, and then Warcraft 2 is really when they refined it, when they figured out what to do better, and really established Warcraft's identity. So that was really what they were working with here was all the lore and background that they had kind of developed as part of that process. Now, Team 2 was now being led by Alan Adam. This was Blizzard's original founder and CEO. He had retired previously, but when he heard that his old company wanted to work on an MMO, namely one to become better than EverQuest, he, as an EverQuest fan, was convinced that it was going to be successful and came out of retirement to lead the design of the game. It's hard to imagine, though, I will say, with the now notoriety of WoW, as it's known to most people, that the project started out with the company and the team unsure about its success. They saw it as a risky project. You know, at this point, with their titles, the Diablos and the Warcraft 2s of the world, they were used to selling over 1 million units on each of their titles, right? And their comparison point was EverQuest. Their measuring stick was EverQuest. And at this point, EverQuest was open about the fact that they only had about 500,000 subscribers. So there was some question over whether they would be able to A, eat into that market, and B, you know, create a successful title on a budget, you know, based on the notion that that was where they were shooting for, right? And on top of that, there were already rumors, there were rumblings that there was an EverQuest 2 in the works, and Star Wars Galaxies was in the works. And these were
Star
known to
Wars,
the
huh?
Star Wars Galaxies was in the works.
Well, what?
Did you never play Star Wars Galaxies?
No, never heard of that one.
Didn't know that there was an MMO in the Star Wars universe?
I did not. No.
That's crazy.
Hmm.
Huh. Okay,
Weird.
well, there was an MMO in the Star Wars Galaxies universe. I believe it was made by Sony. Also, EverQuest was a Sony property too, if I remember correctly. And I want to say we got 6 or 7 years out of Galaxies, and then they shut it down.
Damn.
I
Had
don't
no clue.
remember exactly. Let's see. Out of curiosity, I don't know if my memory serves me correctly. Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies Legends. Does that mean someone revived it? Star Wars Galaxies was a Star Wars themed multiplayer role playing game. It was released in June of 2003, and the server shut down on 15th of December 2011. So 8 years. I wasn't far off. I wasn't far off at all.
No, you were not, Dave.
So, yes. So there were rumors that EverQuest 2 Star Wars Galaxies, and they were known for making good games, but they weren't known for making MMOs, you know? So on the other hand, you had EverQuest 2, which was the sequel to the behemoth EverQuest, and you had Star Wars Galaxies, which was Star Wars and had the backing of Sony, you know? So there was this concern that they were going to be just passed up, right? Because they how could you compete against all that?
Right? That's fair.
So, because of this, the Team 2 project was kept a secret to most of the studio, actually. To those that knew, they looked at it as Alan Aldham's pet project and really nothing more. So, because of this, the studio was overwhelmingly prioritizing development by Team 1, which of course is working on Warcraft 3 at the time. And truth be told, this actually affected the development of World of Warcraft because every time Team 1 changed the story of Warcraft 3, Team 2 was forced to change their locations, their story, their characters to adapt to the changes that Warcraft 3 was making, you know?
But couldn't they take a lot of the code, the source code from 3 and use it? I mean, I guess I don't know how.
They could, and we'll get to that momentarily. You know, Rob,
Oh.
as we continue to explore the vast world of World of Warcraft, it reminds me how amazing it is to connect with people from all over the world. And these days, creating that kind of connection doesn't have to be as epic as taking down a raid boss.
Totally. Whether you're leading a guild in Azeroth or starting a podcast, it all begins with building something special. But where do you start when it comes to podcasting?
Well, that's where Zencaster comes in. Zencaster is an all in one podcasting platform that makes it easier than ever to record high quality audio and video right from your web browser. There's no need for complicated setups or fancy equipment. Just log in and hit record.
So I can start a podcast about my epic World of Warcraft adventures without needing a ton of gear? That sounds too perfect, Dave.
Zencaster doesn't just make recording easy, it takes care of your post production too. It automatically removes all that background noise, balances your audio, and it even trims out those awkward silences or filler words like and ah. It's like having your own in game healer that keeps your audio smooth.
That's awesome. But how do I get my podcast out to all of the major platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts?
Well, Zencaster handles that too. You can easily distribute your podcast to all the major platforms right from their site. It's never been easier to share your voice with the world, whether you're telling WoW stories or something completely different.
All right, I'm sold. How can our listeners get started?
It's simple. Head over to zencaster.com/pricing and use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane. You can get 30% off the first month of any Zencaster paid plan. Whether you're recording your first episode or you're leveling up your current podcast, Zencaster makes it easier than ever.
Well, with how simple Zencaster makes it, I think I'll start a podcast about all the epic raids I've led. It's zero.
It's zero. That's going to be a long podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So go for it. And for all of our listeners out there, if you've been thinking about starting your own podcast, now's the time. Head to zcaster.com/pricing and use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane, and you can get 30% off the first month of any Zencaster paid plan. Start your podcasting journey today.
With that, let's delve back into the world of Azeroth.
Yeah. Dive, dive, dive.
Delve. It's a
Okay,
reference to
fine.
some content in the new.
Yeah, delve. Got it.
Yeah.
So the concepts upon which WoW were established were well established in themselves. The MMO genre had existed for well over a decade. Earlier than that, if you include MUDs, which we learned about in our episode on Run Escape or RuneScape, those would be the multi-user. What are they? Multi-user something? Multi-user. I don't remember. Dictionary directory. What are MUDs, Rob?
It's what you find when you mix dirt with water, Dave.
Oh my God. I knew that you were going to say that the moment I asked you what MUDs were, and I really, really don't like the fact that I can't remember what MUD is right now. It makes me feel like I don't know what I'm doing. It's multi-user dungeon. Good lord. Great Google Moogle. Okay. Anyway, so Alan Adam took these concepts and he borrowed from the same design philosophy they use on Diablo, and that was to take an established genre and to make its gameplay accessible to casual players. Now, because of Diablo's success, Adam was convinced that he could make a friendlier version of EverQuest for an even bigger audience while still giving it the depth that it needed for hardcore gamers. The whole team was excited about the direction of World of Warcraft. And speaking of which, there is no fancy story, Rob, behind its name. As the story goes, about 2 weeks prior to the cancellation of Nomad, an employee named Eric Dodds was promoted from the QA department and put into the design team on Nomad. And various people tell the story the same way. Dodds was the newest member of the team, and he was the first that any of them can remember called it the World of Warcraft. It wasn't the official name at first. They've all said we're surprised no one came up with it sooner, but Dodds was the guy. And really, at the beginning, it was meant to be a placeholder until someone came up with something catchier. But 20 years later, I heard that they're still looking for a catchier name to come up. So
Well, hey, the perfect name takes time, Dave.
the perfect name does indeed take time. And speaking of better, like I had said, they wanted to build a better version of EverQuest. One of its biggest problems, according to this design team, was its open ended areas. Some areas of the game they perceived were empty, while others, in particular, the ones that dropped the best loot, were always crammed full of players waiting for the monsters to appear. Also, as they noted, the game's quests offered little guidance. So to trigger one, you had to know which NPC to talk to, and then it would bring up a bunch of prompts, like conversation prompts, and then you had to figure out which was the correct conversational prompt that would literally prompt the mission, so to speak. So, it was a game that wasn't quite so straightforward, wasn't quite so casual. You either had to know what you were doing or you had to rely on others to show you the way, so to speak. And I know that's part of MMOs, but also there's I would argue, lots of casual gamers that would like to play this type of content solo, and they don't want to necessarily have to depend on others.
You got that right, Dave.
I'm a solo player, so that's why I can say that.
Same here. Playing with the boys is fun, but sometimes you just gotta do it alone.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I like my raids. I like my dungeons. I've done that with clans, you know, groups of people. But I'm mostly a solo gamer in this world. So that being said, with these notions in mind, they really set out to make WoW much more guided. Beginner areas were implemented, things to do were spaced out in a way that the game felt full and alive at all times. NPCs with quests would be clearly marked with an exclamation mark, so you know who to talk to, and there wasn't really any ambiguity over the quest. You talked to the quest guy, he gave you the quest, end of story. It would still be open ended, but there would be clear progression throughout the world. It wasn't just go anywhere, do anything. You were guided through it. You were guided by the quest, you were guided by the geography, you were guided by the dungeons, you were guided by the levels. There are different areas of the game that are ideal for certain levels. And so you would also you would also be guided through the world the correct way by the levels themselves. So they really took some time to focus on the design of WoW in order to correct all the mistakes that they felt, not really mistakes, but the things that they wanted to improve on EverQuest, which they had all put probably way too many hours into. So, Rob, back to World of Warcraft. Initially, they did do just what you said. They started out with World of Warcraft 3. They actually built WoW originally on the same engine, the 3D engine, so on and so forth, that they used to make Warcraft 3. Of course, they had to make modifications to it, right? Because a multiplayer LAN code is way different from multiplayer MMO code, for instance. So they took that 3D engine and they built their little modules onto it. But along the way, as they built the worlds and the worlds became larger and there became more objects and models, and then there became a need for more instances at one time, the demands of the game just became greater. And then more importantly, this was a period of time, it would be the late 2000s, that 3D technology was really rapidly advancing, right? It was going. And so they really were trying to keep up with it. And so they were making substantial changes to that same 3D engine as they went along. So it may have started out as Warcraft 3, but as we know now, it didn't end up anything like it. So maybe art style. I mean, their art styles are similar, but you know what I mean.
Having not played Warcraft 3, I can't say I do, Dave, but
Have
I'll
you
take
played
your
any of
word
the
for it.
Warcrafts other than WoW?
No, I have not.
Nuts. Nuts.
Not really.
Yeah,
You,
not
you
really.
should not be surprised anymore.
No, I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all. But you do like Warcraft and you do like RTSs. So,
That's true. I do.
but you also really like playing a game and sticking to it for a while.
That I do as well. RuneScape, baby.
Very true.
20 years strong.
Development of this game was finally announced to the world for whatever reason at the European Computer Trade Show, ECTS, in September of 2001. I can't remember any other story that we've told where someone has said, hey, we announced our game at ECTS. So that's why I kind of was like, meh. And it was shortly thereafter that the team was really nailing down the art style of their game. They knew that because of the established style of the franchise that they had to go with bright, vibrant colors because, they considered a more realistic approach at some point, but that went out the door. And while the game uses 3D models for its characters, the team really leaned towards utilizing hand drawing for the environments. It took them some time. In 2002, that's when they started to really nail down the art style. And then they kind of brought everything together into one cohesive art style. Originally, they had hoped to have the game ready for the 2003 holiday season, but it became clear towards the middle of that year that it just wasn't going to happen. And at the time, Blizzard's parent company, who was Vivendi, they were working on 3 different MMOs. There was one based on Marvel, there was one based on Lord of the Rings, and then we had World of Warcraft here. But there was a problem at this point. Vivendi was drowning in debt, and there were rumors that other studios were looking to buy up Blizzard. Now, in order to get through this moment of financial instability, Vivendi ended up selling some of its assets that existed outside of its game studios. So, they didn't, weirdly enough, because we don't hear this enough, they didn't sell off a studio or acquire one or merge with one. They didn't touch any of their game studios. On top of this, they made a decision to cancel both the Marvel and the Lord of the Rings MMO. So essentially, what Vivendi was doing was saying, hey, we're hinging our future financial stability on World of Warcraft. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
No pressure at all. From the concept stage to the end, it took the team almost 5 years to put the game together. They did prototyping and then a bunch of closed betas in house, and then they did a public beta in March of 2004. And they continued to work on the game for the months after based on the feedback it provided. On November 23rd, 2004, World of Warcraft was officially released to the world. Now, remember in the beginning, Rob, when we noted that the company was worried about the number of subscribers they'd achieved due to what they were seeing from EverQuest?
I do recall that, Dave.
Some had put the number at 500,000. There were some that were optimistic and said, hey, I think we can shoot for 1 million subscribers. By the end of 2005, the game had reached 5 million subscribers.
Well, I think they did it, Dave.
I definitely think they did it too. At what point did they have the highest number of subscribers? Do you remember what that record was? I can't remember what that damn record was.
I couldn't tell you, Dave.
Let's see. World of Warcraft reached its peak popularity in the second half of 2010 with just over 12 million active subscribers.
That's
Yeah,
a lot more successful than EverQuest.
yeah, yeah. World of Warcraft was well received by critics, no doubt. It ended up being the best selling PC game for all of 2005 and 2006. Funny enough, in 2007, someone at Blizzard came out and said, we predict this game is going to last roughly another 5 more years, and then we'll be talking about sequels. But here we are on its 20th anniversary, still talking about the game. People are still playing the game. You've played the game recently.
I have, yeah.
You jump into this current expansion?
Technically speaking, yes, I did play the pre-patch leading into the War Within, just to have a character leveled that could experience all of the content right off rip. But it's effectively because of this most recent expansion that I got into it. So we will say that I started playing at the War Within, at least consistently. I did create an account way back in the day, probably around when the Lich King was dropped, but um, it was just a free trial, and I didn't ever subscribe after that. So, you know.
I do know, actually.
But I know that you played pretty extensively.
I did play pretty extensively. We say extensively, but we know people that were hooked on this in that early period. People, but there were people that played for years. I mean, years upon years upon years. And I didn't get into it in that beginning in any way, shape, or form. I didn't even get into it at its peak. I probably was hooked on it for the better part of a year, and it was circa, I don't know, I'm guessing 20. I lived here, I think, and I moved here. It would have to be like 2016, 2017, maybe 2018. So I got into it pretty late, to be honest with you, and I was hooked on it for a year. Yeah, I was hooked on it for a year. It's excellent. I mean, I get why 15 million people were 12 million people were playing it at one point. You know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a couple of friends whom I neglected to invite to tonight's episode until it was too late, who have played very consistently over the years. They aren't the most hardcore, as we've often talked. There's obviously people out there who are super serious about the game, and you can't even get into the raids because you didn't do well enough in your raids before, or you've never done them. But they're still pretty heavy into WoW, and they'll also be the first ones to tell you, hey, there was some bad expansions and there were some really great ones. So I mean, when you have an evolving game like this, it's bound to happen.
Think I played in 2015 because I played Battle of Azeroth. I played into the Battle of Azeroth, which came out in 2018. So I was playing in 2017, 2018. Anyway, the thing with WoW, like I said in the beginning, with MMOs in particular, is that their development is constant. These games have to constantly deliver content to keep their subscribers engaged. If they had never changed, if they had never added content, if they had never updated their game, there's no way it would still be here 20 years later. They may not have all the same people 20 years, but they have people for 20 years. The development on MMOs never really stops. We could probably do an episode on each of their expansion packs. They've had 10, starting with the Burning Crusade in 2007. There have been, the most recent one was, as Rob just said, the War Within in 2024. That is the first in what is called the Warsaw Saga, which was announced as a trilogy. So there are, in fact, two more expansions on their way. So we'll get up to 12. It'll be interesting to see what they do at that point. 20 some years. I don't really know where you would go with the genre from here. I think World of Warcraft did MMO so well. There has not really been any game that has captured that market the same way since. Do you think there's another MMORPG out there that has, Rob?
My only argument would be Run Escape, but it's probably not quite as much.
Yeah, RuneScape appeals to a different kind of MMO person. RuneScape is definitely the people who like it old school, who like it grindy. I think RuneScape fits a different niche, but the casual, I think more so for casual MMO people, World of Warcraft did it well, and I don't I can't recall any MMOs since then that have, and we know it doesn't exist because by the numbers there simply isn't another MMO that has caught the gamer culture the way World of Warcraft has, so to speak. I can't think of any since 2004, really. Can you?
No, I cannot.
And to be fair, we have smartphone MMORPGs now. Pokemon Go, I guess technically is one. Weird enough, huh? Star Wars The Old Republic was a massively multiplayer online role playing game that existed after Galaxies. Did you even know The Old Republic existed?
I did. I played the Old Republic.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Galaxies was before that, so. And they've tried, I mean, Lord of the Rings online, I played that for a while. There is Final Fantasy, various MMOs. There
Elder
is
Scrolls.
Elder Scrolls Online is another MMO. Fallout tried to be an MMO with Fallout 76. Warhammer did one. The Matrix Online did one. Age of Conan, Star Trek Online. There are just like they're all over the place, realistically. So, but I just don't. I don't think anything has quite captured the imagination of everyone or has gotten as big. I mean, like WoW is huge. They have BlizzCon every year that people just go to celebrate it, so to speak. I mean, yeah, Diablo and StarCraft, but let's be honest, mostly Warcraft. WoW, you know. So
And Overwatch.
yeah, I think they crapped the bed with Overwatch too. So
Yeah, that's why I didn't say two, Dave.
funny enough, while we were recording, I just got a snap from one of my friends, and it was literally a snap of them showing me something from Overwatch. So it's funny that you
Nice.
mentioned that. I I don't know. I don't know where they would go from here, but we have two more expansions. If you're looking for a good MMO to play, World of Warcraft is an excellent MMO to play, no doubt about that. And I would highly recommend it. If you don't want to buy the newest expansion, you don't ever really have to, because what Blizzard has done with every subsequent expansion is they've made all the earlier ones part of the free content, or the basic content rather. It's not free, so the subscription, so you could theoretically play up to the new expansion every time a new one comes out. So if you don't mind always being one behind, you don't ever really have to buy the new ones as they come out, so to speak. So
Very true.
I wonder how that'll work with the last one. Anyway, that's kind of how we got WoW. You again, for such a big game, you think there'd be more about its development. And while there is, like, it's just such a long process because vanilla WoW in the beginning doesn't look anything like WoW now. And a lot of the development of the game is tied up in how it's changed over the years, so to speak. So that'll have to be another episode, another topic, another time. We're already rounding the bend on time. So today I kind of wanted to talk about where Blizzard was and the context in which WoW was created, and then the concepts behind which WoW was created. So that got us to where we are in November of 2004 and the release of WoW. And 20 years later, we have all the success. So there was a lot of other things that went into it. We talked about the Super Famicom in the beginning, and we talked about Metal Gear Solid, and even here we talked about EverQuest. We've done episodes on a lot of these other topics, and I would really encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes to get a little bit more of a primer on the history of those topics and to kind of understand the time period where we are and how we got there and how they were influential. Of course, if you want to listen to any of those episodes, you can do so by going, first of all, anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. But our favorite place to get your podcast episodes is our website, which is www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, where else can people go to get episodes of our podcast and other things? Wait, what else can people do on our website?
Well, on our website, Dave, People can find a calendar of our upcoming episode topics. You can find a link to our Discord page where you can come talk with Dave and I. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us and have access to ad free and unedited versions of all of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob underscore O underscore Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is Wrong. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It could be about a game, a console, a technology, a person. I just find something relevant to this week and I roll with it. Well, sitting down to do my research on each topic, one of the things that I look for is things that I didn't know. I enjoy learning new things, and anytime I learn something new, I get excited about the prospect of being able to teach it to you, listeners. And so, in celebration of that whole cycle of teaching and learning and teaching, we like to talk about what we've taken away from each episode every week. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned a whole lot about World of Warcraft, and I think that my favorite thing to learn is also the simplest, in that the name was just intended to be a placeholder.
We hear that a lot. Like the DirectX box, right?
That's true.
That was just a
It's
placeholder, too.
it's kind of crazy to think that something so simple could be what is now just a well-known name in the gaming community.
Well, but that's the point. They're all something so simple. Like they're just something that someone came up with that just flows because that's how you come up with it in the fly, you know? And there's no need to change it because it's simple and it works and simple is effective. So they don't, you know?
Well, it's pretty cool to know, you know? I mean, someone was just like, here's a name, whatever," and they're like, "Yeah, we'll use it for now. We'll see what comes better," and then they're just like, nothing's better. It works."
Can you imagine? I think the thing I like kind of segue from that. Can you imagine a world in which Warcraft, the name, was used as it was originally intended? Because it's essentially like Battlefield, right? Because you have Battlefield World War II, or Battlefield Vietnam, or Battlefield 1942. That was their original intention for Warcraft, right?
True.
There was going to be a Warcraft Vietnam. There was going to be a Warcraft Orcs and Humans, and there was going to be a Warcraft, I don't know, a Warcraft Civil War, for instance. That's the what if for this one. The what if is that Warcraft became a series in the same way that Battlefield is a series, and that's just really weird to think about. So
Well, it's probably a blessing that they did that, because I don't think it would have been quite as successful.
very very true.
Well, Dave, what about you?
But that was my Warcraft is me. So
Okay.
yeah, my Warcraft is me. Sorry, I stole your thunder there. I just think that that name on the same vein as the way you brought it up because you were all about the World of Warcraft. I like the way because it's the first time I've ever really had to think about how Warcraft itself the name came up, and I just really like the thought of what it could have been. So
Yeah, I mean, it also, like, it probably wouldn't be as well known of a name if it would have been called something like Azeroth Online.
that is very. I don't know, man. That what I don't know. No doubt being attached to the Warcraft name gave it a boost, right? Because people were excited about war. They knew Warcraft. There was a lot of Warcraft was a well-established franchise in PC gaming, but Matrix Online, Star Wars Galaxies, Warhammer Online. These are also well established franchises, right? And within those worlds are MMOs that were not successful. So while I think that being attached to Warcraft gave them the notoriety to start, they definitely had to stand on their own 2 feet to thrive the way that they did. And thank God they did, right? So I think that they got there on their own in that respect. Does that make sense?
I have to say it does, Dave.
Okay. All right. Well, now the segue. Before I take it into next week, is there anything that you'd like to add to today's episode?
As always, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to all of our listeners. It means the world to us to have you along as we learn about the world of gaming.
Yes, indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our journey through the development of World of Warcraft. From its launch in 2004 to its ongoing expansions and updates, WoW has remained a cornerstone of the MMORPG genre. It created an online world where players could forge their own stories, build communities, and take part in epic adventures, all while setting new standards for what online games could be. Whether you're a longtime player or you're new to Azeroth, we hope that today's episode gave you some greater knowledge of this groundbreaking game. Next week, though, we're swapping out epic fantasy for medieval legends as we dive into Super Robin Hood and we explore the origins of the Robin Hood character in history and folklore. We'll then take a look at how Robin Hood has been depicted in other video games over the years, from his early arcade appearances to his most recent adventures. So grab your bow and arrow and join us again next week for another exciting trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Skibidi dap 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 doo